Hi guys, so today's video on Silent No More, pardon my voice, I'm not feeling very well, is about domestic violence and leaving your abuser. Um, they say on average it takes about 7 attempts for a person to leave their abuser. Um, I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually pretty true. It holds a lot of water. I know it certainly took me more than once. Um, we had like a very short separation after like C was born, like when he was like making threats to kill the dog and not being very nice to me. Um, we had another short separation um, after K was born when I um, discovered cheating and had some other concerns because I had um, caught him reading literotica.com with my daughter on his lap um, and whatnot. And then um, we had like a longer separation when E was a baby. That one was for several months, like 4 to 6 months. And that time he was living with his parents. We had attempted, like I said, counseling together, him separately. And it was really kind of crazy and chaotic. I gave him opportunities to come and see the kids. He never really wanted to. He never really did. So occasionally he would make plans and then cancel them. The one time like we had planned, he could come over and help everybody like decorate the Christmas tree. And he showed up late. And then when my kids started acting like kids, being a little bit loud or playing with a toy loudly or crying because they were toddlers and an infant, he would look at them and snap and be like, well, if that's how you're going to behave, then I need to leave. And I was like, no, you need to leave because you can't control yourself, but you're not going to place the blame on them. Um, and then he had said that he was going to like leave. Can't we do this a different day? Because his dad was making tacos for dinner, and that was more important than spending any time with his children. So he left. I said, whatever. Kids and I decorated the tree. Um, During that time, you know, I would get like a Jekyll and Hyde. I would get the, when can I come home? I'm so sorry. My mom wants to know when I can come home. She wants to know what we're doing to work through this. And I was like, well, you know what we're doing. Like, communicate that to her. This isn't my responsibility. She's not my mom. Um, and then she, of course, was always constantly running into me at the clinic because she works for the Newell Medical Center and would look up our records to find out when we had appointments and then just accidentally run into us outside of them, even though she worked over on the hospital side in the surgery center. So that was a big issue. Um, and then I would get the flip side, where he was like absolutely kind of crazy. I was getting text messages that would say, um, "I'm never letting you go. You're not going anywhere. You can't have a divorce. I won't allow it." Things that I actually showed to his therapist, and his therapist had made the comment, you could get arrested for this, but he never turned him in. Just like when we were talking about his behavior with the kids, the different abusive things that ranged from verbal to physical, because I had no idea about the sexual stuff. Um, I knew he had been like texting inappropriate things to a teenage family member, but I never in a million years thought that he would go as young as toddlers and whatnot. So we had brought those things up. Some of them were new, some weren't. Again, this mandated reporter, his name is Dr. Fox, out of the Newell Medical Center, never made a single report. There was never any like I had thought maybe that would be my saving grace, that he would report him to CPS and there would be an investigation opened, but there never was, um, and whatnot. Um, the old adage that, oh, well, I'm friends with your mom kind of crap kept always coming up, or everybody knows your mom, garbage. So, and whenever I would say something like, what are you going to do when CPS comes knocking on your door? to say, hey, I have a report that you've, you know, hit your kid, that you've thrown your kid, or you've threatened to kill your kid. Not even just stuff to me. And his response was always, well, then I'll just have to deal with it. And it was such an odd response. So anyway, the therapist and whatnot had recommended, you know, obviously that we remain separated for the safety of everybody. Because Kyle wasn't really making, my ex wasn't really making any progress. He wanted him to do different, like anger management exercise kind of things. And, well, he would sit in the office sometimes and be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm doing them. And then go home and not practice them at all. Or like, the therapist had recommended at one point that when I start to notice his like anger rising, his agitation, that, you know, I should, and this is what my ex had agreed to, I'd take my hand and like put it on his leg or his arm or whatever and be like, just to tap, just to be like, okay, here's your cue. You need to calm down, go take a walk, whatever. And anytime I did any of that or any of the other recommendations he had to bring up, he would even tell me, tell him to take a walk. Anytime I did that, he seemed to take it as like a challenge to behave worse versus oh yeah, I am getting pretty worked up, I should maybe figure out what to do about that. Excuse me. So originally the plan was that we were going to remain separated. Then in the beginning of March, my daughter, who has epilepsy, had an appointment up in the cities. It was quite a hike for us. It had been snowing a lot, and all of a sudden I get this message saying he wants to attend this appointment. And he rarely ever did, or when he would attend appointments, he would often just sit in the waiting room, not really be of any help. But we didn't know if she was going to need an EEG that day. And if she did, only one parent could be in the room. I couldn't have the kid, her brother in there or her sister in there. And she won't do them by herself at that age. She was very, against people gluing things to her head. I mean, it's uncomfortable. It's not fun. And so I said, okay, yeah, you can come. And so that morning he met us at our house in the driveway, and had gotten into the van. He decided he wanted to drive, and whatnot. And I had my friend who was living with us. She was in the car too, with all three of my children. So it was him and I up front, E and K in the middle. E was a baby, so she was, still in the rear facing car seat and whatnot. And then C and my friend were in the third row. We had been driving for quite a while. Obviously, we were noticing that it was a pretty bad winter storm. Spots were slick, sometimes whiteout conditions. We had stopped at a gas station, probably, gosh, I don't know, we were probably an hour or more away from home. Yeah, it had to have been. Anyway, that doesn't really matter, but we got, gas. We got the kids some snacks and some juices. We grabbed some sodas and hit the road. Shortly after that, we're driving on Highway 212, and I'm telling him, you need to slow down, because we're going to be in an accident. This weather is crazy. It's slippery. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You can't tell me how to drive. It's fine. And I was like, no, you're getting scared because, like I said, I was like, you're gonna get us in an accident. There was a spot where 212 meets up with County Road 36, I think it was, where they can cross over the other two lanes of traffic going the other way and then turn onto your lane. And he had been initially in that first, left-hand lane, and a car had come out and pulled in front of him, and he decided he wasn't going to try and slow down, so he went to switch lanes. And in the process of doing that, completely lost control of the vehicle because he was still going too fast and he needed to slam on his brakes. And it was all of a sudden we went careening off to the left into the center median. That was kind of like a big grassy ditch area where they had the road signs. Car started spinning. I remember thinking, oh God, we're gonna be hit by oncoming traffic, because I thought we were going to go all the way over. And then the van started to spin. And I remember seeing the road sign and going, shit, this is gonna hurt. And yep, I had put my arms up or whatever, I guess without even thinking, to try and protect myself. And we took out this road sign with my window, and then proceeded to roll our minivan. Landed on the roof. I ended up being pinned, like with my head cranked where I was. I couldn't move. I could see Kay behind me, and she was crying, had like a cut across her nose, and I was telling her it was okay, it was going to be okay. I could see my son C behind her in the third row, and with his autism at the time, he wasn't super verbal, but he was looking at me with that terrified look, and I was like, it's okay, buddy, it's okay, buddy. Could not hear E at all. She wasn't making any noise, and so I start screaming her name and asking my friend if she can see her, if she's okay. She gets up, she looks, because she was not wearing her seatbelt, but she was lucky. Learned her lesson, hopefully, about wearing your seatbelt. And she said, oh, E's smiling. I was like, well, okay, that's a good sign. And then I proceed to scream my ex's name, because he hasn't said anything. He hasn't asked if I'm okay. He hasn't asked if the kids are okay. Like, I can't see him. Is he dead? Like, what's going on? And he wasn't answering. And I kept screaming his name. And then finally he's like, God, what do you want? And I was like, I wanted to know if you're alive. Like, hello? We're upside down in a van and I can't see you. And he was like, no, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. And my purse was sitting like right next to my face, because when we flipped, it flew up and it hit me in my face. So I was able to use my one free arm to grab my BlackBerry. And I called 911, told them that we were in this accident, where we were. It was probably like one of the worst experiences I've had with a 911 operator, because, she just kept going, oh, well, are you northbound or southbound or whatever, east or west, whatever it was. And I was like, I really don't think it matters, because we're in between both lanes and we are the only car flipped over. And whatnot. And then I was trying to tell her how many people we had in our vehicle, because obviously we weren't all going to fit into one ambulance. And she hung up on me. So much for staying on the line until help arrives. A bystander had showed up, or stopped, pulled over, whatever. And he was knocking on the window, like asking, like, well, they were pretty much broken on the one side, hey, you guys okay? Said he had called, I think 911 maybe too. I told him I had called 911, and he was trying to keep my kids calm because they were crying. He had asked if we were okay with him taking the kids out of the vehicle, and waiting for the ambulance and everybody to come. We said that was fine, because we obviously didn't know like how bad the damage was, and he was telling my ex, like, you need to shut the engine off, because who knows what kind of damage you did. You don't want to start like an explosion, or ever like shut it off. And then so my ex did that. He got my kids out. He was struggling with E's car seat, because the rear facing ones have that extra little latch button you got to push. But he got them out, and then after a little bit, finally, police officers, fire department, EMT show up. I remember this guy, like a really burly guy with like this reddish orange hair, had crawled in through the side door, the sliding door behind me, and then peeked around the other side of my seat, and he's like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, can you get me out of here? That's all I want. Just get me out. I'm sick of hanging upside down. This hurts. Of course, asking, oh, where do you have pain? And it's like, well, I'm crammed up against the roof of my car. My neck hurts. My back is pretty freaking sore. My shoulder feels messed up. My hips, my knees, like, just get me out of here. And whatnot. And like, before he actually even came over, I remember overhearing this conversation, because at first, like, I could hear people coming, but everybody was going over to my ex's side, and saying, hey, oh, we heard everybody's out, and they were starting to help him, and he wasn't, like, going, hey, my wife is in here too, like, has anybody checked on her? Like, I had to start screaming, like, I'm in here too, and that was when that guy finally came over. Anyway, he ended up breaking my window the rest of the way. Told me to brace myself, because he was going to cut my seatbelt. and I would fall to the roof. And that happened. I remember him going, "Oh, how you feeling?" And I was like, really lightheaded. And he's like, "That's probably because the blood's rushing back to your head. You've been hanging upside down for like 30 minutes." Folded me kind of like a pretzel, pulled me out my window, slapped me onto a backboard in the snow that was cold. I could kind of see, because they put a neck brace on, but I could kind of see my kids in the back of an ambulance watching. And they were telling me that my kids were looking like they were okay, and whatnot. They had to call for a second ambulance because they obviously only dispatched one because she hung up on me. And then they proceeded to get my ex out. In the first ambulance, it was me, my daughter Kay, and my daughter E. A second ambulance was my ex, my son C, and then my friend, and whatnot. And so I had a police officer come over, and he was like asking me how fast my ex-husband was going. And I said, well, I'm at least 60 miles an hour. He wasn't like going for the weather, asking like where the insurance was, all those kinds of things. And I was like, I don't know, they're in the dashboard of the car if it's still there. Let's just get out of here, please. Whatnot. We get brought to this hospital, find out, kids are okay. E was still recovering from croup. So other than that, I mean, she was pretty much fine. Kay had the cut across her nose, from some glass. Otherwise she was okay. Obviously they were sore, from being like jarred, which they ended up all going to a chiropractor for. And then C was okay too. We were separated. It was initially me and the kids in a room. I was strapped to a backboard and left alone for a while, at the Waconia Hospital in this room. And then they decided they were going to send me for a CT scan, to check everything out. And I remember this, I think he was a priest, had come in, and asked if he could take the kids for a walk while I was having these scans done, because obviously they couldn't come with me. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And then so I go do the scan, come back. Well, the kids never came back. They were putting like meds in my IV, and then I was like, and then they just left me there. Couldn't reach the call button that well because I was stuck on this backboard. Finally a nurse comes in, gets me off the backboard, but didn't tell me where my kids are. I then she handed me my phone, and then I started texting my ex-husband being like, well, where are you? Are you okay? I don't know where the kids are. And he was like, oh yeah, I just got cut, my ear got cut, I'm getting stitches, I'm fine. And then he said that they brought the kids over to his room, and that shortly they would be moving them to a different room where I could eventually join them because we had to wait for his parents to come pick us up. So we get to this room. I can see, he's got some stitches or whatever. Seems fine for the most part. Annoyed at me for whatever reason. And whatnot. And then, I immediately started making calls because my son was in an autism preschool, because I was wondering if I'm like, been in this accident today. He doesn't have any injuries. Do you think I should go ahead and send him to school tomorrow to keep the routine, or should I keep him home? Because this was like traumatic. And, she had said, no, go ahead, send him to school. Keeping the routine is best. So, he was like annoyed that I was like trying to like take care of things. And then they ended up they couldn't find any extra like car seats for us to drive home in, because, after an accident, you're not supposed to use your car seat anymore. So they ended up, having my in-laws that grabbed a couple boosters for the other kids, and then they had us still use E's infant carrier because we couldn't find one at that point for her anywhere. Brought my friend over. She was in a neck brace, on crutches, whatnot. And we had to wait for like a couple hours before his parents finally showed up, and we all climbed into their car. Excuse me. And kids were pretty quiet. I was still having issues with my arm because they never really had checked it over. It was messed up, and his mom is a surgical nurse, and she was like, oh, you might want to get like a brace or something for that, because that looks pretty bad. And I said, yeah, maybe. I'm like, I just want to go home. I'm tired. I hurt. And then we get back to New Ulm, back to our house, and it was all like she dropped him off there, like going, oh, well, you guys just went through this traumatic event together. Maybe he should just spend the night with you. And then he never left. Suddenly the conversation went from and I'm staying here for a night or two to help figure out, the vehicle situation, the insurance and all of that, which I ended up all doing on my own anyway, because he wouldn't take the calls, he wouldn't deal with anything. And whatnot, trying to find out where our vehicle was taken to, found out that it was totaled, found out that we had to pay some money, and give them the title of the car, and they would take it and scrap it for metal. But we had to pay because we needed to get our things out of it. His mom had given him her old car because she was getting a new one, or had gotten a new one anyway, and whatnot. And then he was telling me about how this was like a life or death situation. It opened his eyes to his behavior. He wanted to stay home, that he promised things would be better because, life was too short. And so I was like, okay. We told his therapist that. The therapist was like, okay, keep the boundaries and all those things. So he was sleeping in a different room and whatnot. And then it wasn't too long after that he pretty much quit therapy. He blamed it on work because he was an accountant and it was tax season. But then even after tax season, he didn't go back. He didn't want to go back. He kept saying he didn't need to. Anytime I would bring up therapy, he would belittle me, tell me I'm crazy. If I said I wanted a divorce, he said I was crazy. I was never going to get it because he'd never agree to it. And I said, well, I don't need your permission to divorce you. I can just file the papers. I was simply hoping that, when it came to this, that maybe we could file it on our own and like be in some sort of agreement, make this copacetic. But he said no, and he was never going to let me go and whatnot. So, obviously time had passed, some of the things I mentioned in my previous videos had occurred. There were times when, excuse me, I had made plans to leave and he'd find out. And in the middle of the night, he would, take my entire purse. He would take all of my money. He would take my keys. So I couldn't leave. Or he'd flip out and then stay home from work to ensure that I wasn't leaving. But finally, when I was pregnant with my last child, A, things were they were going downhill, and they were going downhill fast. His behaviors were escalating. I began to become suspicious that he might be physically abusing our children, because they were making comments every once in a while that Daddy had hit them, when they were either alone in a room, or like if he was watching them when I ran to the grocery store, or if I was in the hospital with, E, things like that. Or, when I was even in the hospital because I was having complications with A, and I was like, and he would always be like, I did not, they're lying to you. And then, other times I would find what would look like, a hammer, and I'd be like, what the hell was this? What happened? Oh, we were just playing. I must have grabbed them too hard. They're pale anyway, so it's fine. And so I was like, okay, we need to like get the hell out of here. He was abusing me during my pregnancy with A. I mean, at one point we were in the driveway and he tried to run me over with the car, or the van, excuse me. Had bumped into my stomach. And I called the doctor and made up this excuse saying, oh, well, my husband and I were walking in the house and he didn't see me and he ran into me, and hit my stomach and I fell over. Went to go get checked out, make sure baby was fine. I think he looked at me weird, like it's kind of a weird story, but again, no help. Several times I had attempted to try and tell them that I was not safe at home, but there were times where either they wouldn't ask the question like they're supposed to at every visit, or I would answer it and they just wouldn't listen to me, or they would make excuses and say, oh, but I know his mom and they're supposed to be such a great family. And I don't care. Like, if you think you know them, you obviously don't. I'm telling you I'm not safe, and you're perpetuating the problem by not helping me. So that was kind of crazy. That obviously was not working. There were other times where they would literally ask me, right, like he was sitting right next to me, and they'd be like, do you feel safe at home with your husband? We don't have to have him go out to ask this question because we know him. Yeah, like I'm going to sit there in front of him and be like, this dude beats the crap out of me. No, I don't feel safe at home because that's not going to end well for me. So, yeah. I had, some friends offering, like, that lived in town, oh, hey, you can come sleep on our couch, because they were kind of getting fed up with his behavior. He was treating them badly and whatnot. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's the best idea, and whatnot. And then several of my friendships that I had finally just formed with, other moms with kids, the same age, had ended because of his behavior, because of how he would talk to them, how he would treat them, how he would be an absolute jerk. Like if we went on a play date to the park, I had one who reamed me, because he suddenly showed up while we were at the park, and I didn't know he was even coming, but he figured out we were there, and he showed up, and he was pissed. That was pretty much the last time I actually ever saw her, other than getting the text message later, about what an asshole my husband was, and that I was stupid for allowing that and not leaving him, even though she knew damn well I was trying. But it's not like you can just get up and walk out the door. That's not how it works with kids. That's not how it works with domestic violence. There were times where, like I said, I was making plans and he would find out. What eventually ended up happening was, it was June, of 2015, and, we had gone to my family's house for a graduation. I think it was the graduation anyway. It was either graduation or the Eagle Scout thing, and he was not behaving very well. He'd been confronted by my family members about his behavior, and that me and my sister were in close contact, and I told her everything, and that he better not harm anybody anymore. Of course, he stares straight ahead, pretends like this conversation isn't happening. Car ride home was hell. He was an ass. He was driving erratically, trying to crash, laughing when my kids were crying, laughing when I was saying, you need to pull over, like, let me drive, like, this is enough. Told him, like, when we get home, like, I want you to get the hell out of this house. I want you to go back to your parents, get out. I'm not doing that. And he didn't. So eventually I ended up coming up with this plan. My original plan was that I was going to leave with the kids, and whatnot, and I was gonna go show up at my family's house and just be like, hi, we need to come here. I had one friend that I was still talking to. I was texting her because I was like, hey, this is the plan. If anything happens to me, like, please tell the police that he probably did something. Otherwise I'll let you know when I get there safely. Somehow at some point in the middle of the night, I don't know if he went through my phone or what, he figured it out. And when I got up the next morning, my van was gone. No note, no nothing. My keys were gone. I then went to my purse. All my money was gone. All my cards were gone. And my son had said, yeah, mommy, daddy took those. I saw him steal them out of your purse. And I was like, okay, great. It's like, what the hell do I do now? So then I started texting him, and I was like, hey, like, do you have the van? Where are you? Wasn't getting any responses. So finally I said, okay, the van is missing. Lots of things are missing. I'm going to call the police and make a report that it's been stolen. Finally, he calls me on the phone. He's like, don't do that. I took the van. I was just too busy to respond. And I was like, why the hell did you take the van? Well, I had to work out of town today. And I'm like, again, why would you take the van? You have your own car. He's like, oh, there's just more space. And I was like, you're driving alone. Why the hell do you need more space? Just a bunch of BS excuses. I did find his keys to the house in his car. However, when I went to go open his car and try to start it, there was no gas in there. It was completely empty, so I couldn't use it anyway. Aside from the fact that I couldn't fit, 3 children in there either. I couldn't fit 3 car seats in the back of that car because it was like a 92 Ford Escape, or not an Escape, Ford Focus. I don't know my cars very well. So anyway, I ended up texting him back, and I asked him how far away he was, because I also had, my girls had speech therapy appointments that day, and they needed to get to them, and we were not going to be able to walk to it, and I had no money to use a cab and whatnot. And then he said he was like an hour and a half away or something like that, and I said, well, you have just enough time to bring me back my vehicle, and so I can get these girls to their appointment. I'm not going to get in trouble for missing this appointment because it wasn't canceled 24 hours in advance. Threw a big stink about it, and I said, listen, you have exactly 2 hours to bring my van back to me, or I'm going to call the police and tell them that my van is stolen and I don't know where it is. And whatnot. And he got a little bit scared and he's like, oh, don't do that. No, 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 no. I'll bring the vehicle back. I'll be there. I promise. And I was like, okay. And while that happened, I was like, I'm going to do something drastic. Like, because this was supposed to be my day. This was supposed to be my day to get the hell out of here with my kids and ensure that they were safe, and to ensure that the baby I was carrying was never going to be a part or a witness to domestic violence or to be abused herself. So I ended up doing, I went to the bathroom, I packed up like all his toiletries, I packed up all his medications, which he was not taking because he did not like to comply with doctor's orders. Put those, you know, in like the front foot space of his passenger seat in his car. I then proceeded to go and grab all of his clothes, left them on the hangers, folded them over in half, filled up his car with all of his clothes, with any work stuff that he had, dress, shoes, pajamas. Like, I gave him everything that he would need in terms of like self-care and whatnot. Excuse me. And then after I was done putting all of his things in the car, I went to his key ring and took the lock for the deadbolt to our house off of it. And just, like, I think I stuck it in my bra, actually, just in case he had noticed right away so he wouldn't find it. Forgot to take the key for the door handle part. That was a mistake I ended up later regretting. However, so then I proceed to lock the door, lock the deadbolt, and stand outside with the kids, have his keys in my hand, sans the deadbolt key. And he shows up and I'm like, I need to go right now. I need to get these girls to therapy. We're going to be late. Quickly get them buckled. And he was just watching me buckle them before he didn't look at his car. He didn't realize that it was filled with stuff. When I pulled out, that's when his face changed, because he looked over and saw that his car was full of all of his stuff. Got some angry text messages, and I said, hey, we're separating. Go to your parents. Go wherever. I'm like, you have family in town. I don't. So now I'm staying in the house and you're not. A bunch of, you know, angry text messages, calling me every name under the sun, making threats to the, I'm so sorry, please just let me sleep there. I promise I won't do anything. Please let me sleep in the driveway. Like, no. Put my foot down. I'm like, you're not. And I mean, I was terrified. I thought, holy crap, like, this could get me killed. What am I gonna do if he sets the house on fire or breaks in or something? And I had to be very careful when I was coming and going to make sure that he wasn't catching me. So, you know, barge his way in. And I always had to try and remember that I had to lock the deadbolt every single time we went in the house and every single time we left the house, so that way he could not get in, and whatnot. And for the first 4 or 5 nights, he did not go to his parents. Originally, you know, he'd sent me a couple sad text messages because he tried to sleep at the park or sleep in his car next to a park, and a cop had pulled him over, or not really pulled him over because he was pulled over, but, you know, came and knocked on his window and was like, hey, what are you doing here? You know, thinking he was like some drunk or whatever. And Kyle said he had responded that he was just returning from an out-of-town business trip and he was tired, and so he felt like it was better and safer to pull over and take a nap than to finish driving home. And so the officer let him off with just a verbal warning. And then I started finding him in our driveway at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he had even told me what he was doing was he was watching the house from, he'd park close by, close enough to see the house, and he would wait until all the lights went out. And then he'd wait a little bit to, you know, ensure that we were probably like asleep or wouldn't hear noise. And then he was pulling into the driveway and sleeping. You know, I had discovered it one night when I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, he's in the fucking driveway. I was texting people to let them know that that's where he was, what was going on. Finally, I told him, I'm like, you pull into this driveway again to sleep, I'm calling the police. I emailed his parents and said, hey, he hasn't told you yet. I've kicked him out. Gave them a list of reasons as to why I kicked him out, and said that we were separating and he needed a place to stay. So they finally reached out to him or whatever, and whatnot. They were pissed off at me. And then he went to go stay at their house and whatnot. However, he was constantly driving by our house. His parents were constantly driving by to see if we were there. If the van was ever not in the driveway, I would get an angry text message. Where the hell are you? What are you doing? You should be at home. And every time I was like, this, none of your business where I am. Absolutely none of your business. Like, I kept him informed of the kids' things. I kept him informed of medical things, and things of that nature. But I'm like, you don't need to know where I am 24/7. And then I had told him if he wanted to see the kids, he could, but he could not be alone with them. I said, you know, we could be somewhere in public. I had to be present. If he wanted to get, you know, a supervisor or whatever, it just wasn't going to be alone. And he didn't really express too much interest in really seeing them or following through on any plans to see them. What ended up happening was when he would think we were doing like something fun, that's when he wanted to show up. My daughter A, who was a newborn, he did come to her birth because I made the agreement that if he signed up for like some sort of anger management or parenting class, he could come to her birth. If he did not sign up for those classes, he was not coming, and I would tell hospital security that he was not a safe person to be there. So he signed up for the parenting classes, and then so he was there when A was born. He was supposed to come to the house for like 2 weeks because I had a C-section and I wasn't supposed to be doing a lot of things. And he promised that it wouldn't be like when I had my C-section with Ian. He was actually going to help. After about 5 days, not only was he not helping, he was being a complete jerk and an ass. And I said, get the hell out. Go back to your mom's. You're not staying here anymore. I'm like, if you're not actually going to help, you don't even get these 2 weeks. Go, goodbye, be gone, get out. It's over. He left. He was pissed, and whatnot. And then E ended up, she was having her birthday, and this was like right after A had been in the hospital, because she was vomiting up blood, which he didn't show up for, didn't care, didn't visit. I would send him emails, text messages saying like what the doctors were saying, and whatnot, what they were doing at the hospital. Never got a reply back about any of those things. He didn't even tell his parents that she was sick or in the hospital and that any of this was going on. So she was in the hospital over E's birthday. We come back. He says, hey, my mom wants to do a little, birthday celebration with her since you haven't been able to do the birthday party yet. Her and I want to come over on this day at this time. We'll have some pizza. She can open her presents. And I said, okay, that's fine. So, cleaned the house, did all that stuff, got everything ready. And then he just showed up by himself. And he's like, oh, mom's running late. So I decided to go ahead of her. She'll be here anytime now. I was like, okay, hairs were standing up. I was a little bit worried. My daughter Kay was eating candy. She ended up dropping the wrapper on the floor because she was like twirling around and eating it and whatnot. And he screamed at her, you fucking fat ass, you need to pick that up. And I said, whoa, you need to talk to her like that, because she immediately like shrunk and was scared. And I said, look, do you really think she's going to pick it up when you're screaming at her and calling her names? Because he kept screaming it over and over again because she wasn't picking it up, because she was just standing there frozen. And I was like, first of all, I'm the one who cleans this house. So if anybody should be pissed off that there's a wrapper on the floor, it should be me, because I live here. I'm the one who cleans it. You don't. I said, second of all, if you would just ask her nicely, pretty sure she'd pick it up. And so he kind of sloughed it off at me. Well, then Kay grabbed his cell phone and was like, haha, Daddy, I have your phone, trying to be all playful and cute. And he flipped out. He looked at her and he said, you're fucking dead. And her eyes got huge. She took off running. She still had the phone in her hand because at that point, just a reaction, I guess, fight or flight. And he got up and he chased after her. She went and she set the phone down on the dining room table, proceeded to try and run back towards me. I was breastfeeding A at the time, trying to like unlatch her and get her off so I could get up. I was only a couple months out from this C-section, so getting up was still not easy. And so I'm trying to, you know, detach this baby from my breast, trying to move with this C-section thing that isn't quite healed yet. And instead of just going over to the table and grabbing his phone, he went right after Kay and kicked her to the ground. Like literally like took her out by the shins. And so she goes down hard. She's screaming. She's crying. He grabs his phone and starts to walk over like he's just going to sit down like nothing's. I said, what the hell is the matter with you? I said, get out. You are not going to hurt these children. And he goes, well, I didn't do anything. I'm like, I just fucking watched you. What do you mean you didn't do anything? I just saw it with my own eyes. Like, you can't deny this. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. And I said, you have until the count of 3, and then I'm calling the cops. You'd never fucking do that, you stupid bitch. Got all the kids crying now. He sits down on the couch, and so I go, 1, 2, 3. And I called the Newham Police Department. When the dispatcher answered the phone, asking what I needed, I said, my husband just threatened to kill my daughter and kicked her down. I need an officer immediately. Is he still in the house? Yes, he is. Then all of a sudden he was like, oh shit, she really called the cops. Took off out the back door. 2 police officers showed up at my house. Kay was still crying. C was now crying. E was crying. The only one who wasn't crying was A, who was now in her baby swing. Kay had a red mark on her leg. You know, they never had any interaction really with the police before. I was crying because I was scared. So I'm making this statement. He's asking me if I would, you know, be willing to do an order for protection. Or that was one of my options. And I said, well, I guess at this point I might have to, I guess. I said, I never got one before because I was worried that I would like poke the bear and make this worse, and whatnot. So he was telling me about that, as being an option and whatnot, that they were going to file this report and that they would, a report would also go over to, Brown County Human Services, for like a CPS report. And I was like, okay, great. Don't know what to do with that information, but okay, thank you. And then as we're finishing up, his mom walks in the house and she's like, oh my God, what's going on? I see cop cars. And there was a female officer and she's like, are you Samantha's mom or are you Kyle's mom? And she's like, well, I'm Kyle's mom. And she goes, well, he threatened and assaulted your granddaughter. So we were called over here. And her face was pissed off. Not pissed off at him. Pissed off at me. She then sets her little gifts down and she's like, well, I'm just going to go then. And the male officer who was talking to me had looked at her and said, hey, you know, if you want, you could stay, like, we're literally like pretty much done. And she's like, no, I'm leaving, and storms out and whatnot. After that, found out that the police never even contacted him. They didn't call him up, didn't say, hey, like, where are you? We need to talk to you about this incident. I got flooded with text messages from him asking, you know, saying he was sorry. Can I please come home? I want to make this right. I promise you and Kiva can kick me all weekend long and I won't do anything to you. I then received a bunch of Snapchats as well of him in his car, saying the same crap. Then he called and left me voicemails, which I still have to this day, where he says that he did that to her. And then he's like, puts on this like fake corny voice and he's like, I'm so sorry, Kay, I didn't mean to do that. Like, whatever, lying sack of crap. Around the same time, there was an incident with my son, C, as well, who was trying to play with him. And initially, he was playing with him just fine. He decided he had had enough and was done playing, told C, stop, I'm done, you know, just once. And C, of course, with being a young child and having autism, he wanted to keep playing, so he kept trying to play with him. And instead of saying, hey, I said stop, I'm done, he picked him up and threw him into a TV tray, a wooden TV tray, totally messed up his right ear. He was screaming and crying on the floor, and I remember asking him, like, what the hell's the matter with you? And I'm like, first of all, I'm like, he's hurt. How the frick are you not responding to this? And he was like, oh, I didn't realize my own strength. I didn't think I threw him that hard. I'm like, well, he's literally screaming bloody murder. His ear is completely red. It's already swelling up. I'm like, you can't even say, hey, I'm sorry, even if it was an accident? And he looks over his phone. He's like, oh, sorry. Oh my God, that was the last. I had texted this social worker who was part of the family outreach program for kids who had like special needs, high needs, and whatnot. And I told her what had happened, and she's like, I think it's time for you to get this order for protection. I said, well, I'm terrified. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what the hell he's going to do to me. So that was the very first time I had ever heard of CADA, which is the Committee Against Domestic Abuse over there. And so I had called and said, hey, I think I need to get an order for protection, made an appointment. When the other kids were at school, A and I went over, sat down in this lady's office. I asked her if I could sit on her floor just in case, A needed to breastfeed or needed to be housed. She said that was fine. And I didn't realize how much I had been holding in my emotions for so long because I start talking and then all of a sudden I just start bawling and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's okay. Like you can cry. She's like, this stuff is horrible. She then proceeded to help me fill out an emergency OFP. She then went with me to the courthouse to file it. And while we were standing there, the judge granted it. But we had to have a hearing in 2 weeks because it involved children. And they told me that they were going to serve him, hopefully that night and whatnot. I was supposed to get a phone call confirming whether he was served or not, so that way I would know if any contact he made after that was a violation of this order for protection. And sure enough, that night at like 6:30, he starts texting me, asking for things and, saying different things. And I didn't say anything at first because I was like, well, he probably just didn't get served yet. And whatnot. And then it was Halloween. I knew he had been served at that point because it had been like a week or so. And I took my kids trick-or-treating, didn't go to his parents' house, obviously, because he lives there and I have an order for protection against him, so why the hell would I? And then he starts to text me late at night. It's like 10 o'clock at night going, well, you could have come over here. Why didn't you come over here? I didn't respond. Called the police right away. Talked to an officer there in New Ulm and said, hey, I don't know when he was served, but I'm pretty sure he was because we have this hearing coming up like November 4th and he's now texting me and this emergency OFP says absolutely no contact of any kind whatsoever. No phone contact, no third party contact, nothing. So they go and they look. Yep, he's been served. So they come over to my house so that way they can take photographs of the text messages in my phone. That officer noticed the previous message and whatnot, and he's like, hold on, let me go see exactly when he was served. And he went and looked and he said, did you know that he had already been served his OFP when he sent you these other messages? And I said, no, I just assumed he hadn't been served it yet because they were probably waiting for him to get over. He's like, we served him 15 minutes before he started texting you those things. And I was like, what the hell? So they ended up filing 2 complaints against him for violating this emergency order for protection and whatnot, for making contact with me. And then, of course, Brown County Human Services came over to do an interview with the kids to try and ask them about their dad and to see about his ear. And he was scared and confused. He didn't really want to talk about it. So then she had made a recommendation and just said, hey, if you decide you want to bring this man like back into your house, back into your life, we're gonna step in. And I said, I fully intend to get this order for protection on the 4th, and I intend to get divorced. Like, I am done. And then she's like, oh, well, if the judge grants him any visitation, we will still have to be involved with your children to make sure they are safe. So I said, okay. We had this hearing on the 4th. He didn't have an attorney. I didn't have an attorney. The judge had gone through the photos of different things that I had submitted as evidence of abuse. I gave my testimony about the abuse that I had suffered, what my kids were going through, how terrified my son was, how terrified my daughter was, and whatnot. And he just looked pissed off, was doing his fist ringing thing. Like, never was there any, like, I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry. Like, there was no apologies. Told the judge what the CPS worker had said in terms of if he allowed him to have contact, then they were going to get involved with my kids. And when he heard that, he said, no contact. he gave me temporary sole legal and physical custody until that could be, decided later. Before he actually granted the OFB, he said, what are your intentions with this relationship and with your kids? And I said, I'm moving the hell away from here and I'm getting a divorce. I said, I'm not sure which order it'll be in. That's what I'm doing. He said, okay, fair enough. Granted it for 2 years, gave me sole legal and physical custody, ordered him to pay $1,000 in child support, but he ordered it to our joint checking account. So yeah, he was putting the money in, but he had access to it. He could also see if I decided to swipe my card somewhere, and whatnot. So then after that, there was more violations. His family started stalking us, constantly driving by the house, making it known that they were driving by the house and whatnot. And then it was Christmas time, and his mom called me, and she said, hey, Grandpa and I just have some presents for the kids, which they never saw my kids. They had no relationship with them. My kids didn't even call them Grandma and Grandpa. And whatnot. She said, can I bring them over? We just want them to have this. It'll just be me. I'll just drop them off and go. And I said, well, that was fine. We set up a time and a date. Well, it just so happened that A had gotten sick that day, and I had to bring her over to urgent care. And when I tried getting a hold of her but wasn't able to. And as I'm walking to the parking lot after we were done with this appointment, she had to get, medication, so I needed to go to the pharmacy still. His dad calls me, and he's pissed off. Well, she went over there. You said you were going to be there. And I'm like, didn't you get my voicemail? I'm like, A is sick.